let's talk about the different kinds of grasses, because I get that question asked a lot. What is the best type of grass to grow? And if you're going to resod your lawn, what kind of grass should I install in my lawn? And is there a best grass for this kind of area? Actually, all grasses that we grow in this area do have strengths and weaknesses. There's not one ideal grass. There's some that are lower maintenance than others that have fewer problems, but they all have some kind of strength and weakness to them. The most common kind of grass that we have in this area is centipede. The reason centipede is more common here than anything else is simply by default, because that is for many years the grass that most of the sod farms in this area within trucking distance grew. So consequently, that's why most of the homes that were constructed got centipede installed in their lawns, because that was the cheapest kind of grass, because that was what the sod farms were growing that were close by. If you go down to Central or South Florida, all the sod farms down there grow St. Augustine. Consequently, you see more St. Augustine down there because that's what the sod farms in the area are growing. Here in the last 5-10 years, sod farms have started to diversify a lot more. They've started to grow zoysia, which is a really good grass. I really like zoysia, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, why I like it so much. But as far as the different attributes of the different types of grasses, centipede is an okay grass. One of the main things about centipede, though, and I try to tell people this up front, because a lot of times I'll talk to a new homeowner and they just got this new house, and they're just really happy with it. The sod is newly laid, and it's okay, but it's not really nice yet. But they'll say something like, "Boy, I want my grass to be lush and green and the envy of the neighborhood." What they're asking for is they're asking for a trophy lawn, okay? And I just have to tell them, you'll never have that with centipede. Centipede is not your trophy grass. You can try and make it your trophy grass, your trophy lawn, but by doing so you'll kill it, because it will not tolerate high maintenance. It will not tolerate a lot of fertilizer. It won't tolerate a lot of watering, because it'll create a lot of thatch, and then the lawn will eventually decline. And many of the problems that I encounter with talking to people with centipede lawns is they have tried to over-maintain their lawn, and just in doing so caused it to decline. Centipede is kind of, one of the nicknames of centipede is the poor man's lawn, because it's not meant to it's not meant to be maintained at a very high level. And it's not meant to be fertilized a lot. One nitrogen application per year is usually good for centipede. Now, there is an exception to that, and let me just kind of throw out a caveat to that generality. If you have a brand new centipede lawn and it's not very dense, and you can look down and you can see the individual pieces of sod where they're put together, and there's a lot of dirt in between the runners, you can, under those conditions, go ahead and give it some extra fertilizer for one growing season, and kind of get it to become more dense and fill in. And then after it gets to where it's a fairly decent lawn, then back off. Centipede, again, because with new construction, most of the time they bring in fill sand, which has no nutrients in it, and they lay the centipede on there. The centipede will survive on that basically beach sand, but it won't thrive until you start giving it a little bit of nutrition. So what you can do with a brand new lawn, once it gets established, you don't want to put any kind of fertilizer or herbicides on a lawn until it gets established. At least give it at least 2 months during the growing season. If it was installed in the fall or winter, you want to wait until it's the following growing season and give it a couple months to get established before you start putting any kind fertilizer or herbicide on it. You can use insecticide if you have like fleas or ants or something like that you need to treat. Insecticide isn't going to hurt new sod, but fertilizer and herbicide will damage new sod. So once the lawn gets established, you can give it a couple really good shots of fertilizer and get it up and growing and kind of get it, get it to become more dense, water it a lot, and then once you get it to that point, kind of back off. Centipede by nature is kind of a pale green to kind of a yellowish color. That's what it's supposed to be. Again, a lot of times people will look at that and go, oh, there's something wrong with my grass because it's not dark green, and keep fertilizing it and keep it that dark green. You don't want to do that with centipede. Understand that it's supposed to be a light to a kind of almost sometimes a yellowish green color. Again, I refer back to the marketing that goes on at the big box stores and all the little, nice, pretty little displays that tell you, for a darker, greener lawn. Everybody that sells lawn products, they start off with a phrase, for a darker, greener lawn, fill in the blank. But the thing is centipede, you don't want it dark, and you don't want it, dark. You don't want it darker green, because if you make it darker green in the long run, that's unhealthy for it. Centipede, along with all other warm season turf grasses, grows laterally as well as vertically, so it will spread. It will, like if, I get a lot of questions at this time of year where maybe over the winter there's been areas of the lawn that have declined a little bit, and you have these empty patches, and people say, well, should I get some seed and throw in there? What should I do? If there's no other factors that's causing that lawn, that area to decline, if it's just over the winter decline from wear or whatever, once the grass starts getting gets up and growing and starts moving laterally, the edges of that bare spot will start to migrate into that bare spot and fill that bare spot. So you really don't need to do anything unless you want to get some grass plugs just to speed the process up and install grass plugs and get it to fill in faster. Centipede does not require, it's somewhat drought tolerant. It doesn't require a lot of water. It is possible to overwater centipede. Again, if by overwatering it, it'll stimulate too much top growth. Another factor of centipede is that it is not shade tolerant, very, very shade tolerant. It will tolerate a little bit of shade, but overall it's not a real shade tolerant grass. One of the biggest pests that you deal with in centipede grass is mole crickets. Mole crickets love centipede. They'll eat the roots and they'll eat the runners of centipede, so that if you have mole cricket activity, you'll just have these brown grass blades laying on the ground, and you just pick them up and there's no root or runner or anything attached because mole crickets have devoured them. As far as St. Augustine grass, for a long time St. Augustine was our only other alternative to centipede in this area. And if people didn't like their centipede, that's what they would go to, is they would go to St. Augustine. St. Augustine is a relatively good grass. It has a darker color than centipede. It has a little coarser texture than centipede. Some people do not prefer the coarser texture of St. Augustine. They just don't like the way it looks, but that's a personal preference. St. Augustine is the most shade tolerant variety of grass that we can grow in this area. It will tolerate shade better than any other type of grass. However, it is not shade proof. A lot of times, I'll talk to somebody with a St. Augustine lawn, and they'll have maybe here's a typical scenario. They'll have a St. Augustine lawn that's been in place for several years. They'll have some trees in the yard. These, maybe some big oak trees or something, and and they've lived there for 10, 15 years, and under these oak trees, the St. Augustine has started to decline. And they'll say, well, you know, back when I moved here, or even 5 years ago, the grass was doing fine there, but now it's not. Well, what happens is over time, the canopy of the tree closes in and it becomes more dense, lets in less light, and you know you get to a tipping point where the grass just does not have enough light to stay viable, and it starts to decline. So St. Augustine, although it is shade tolerant, it still needs some daylight in order for it to survive. Usually about 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight is what St. Augustine requires to stay viable and stay healthy. There is one pest that is particular to St. Augustine that doesn't affect any other type of grass that we have here in this area, and that's called a chinch bug. A chinch bug is a tiny little bug. It's about 1/8 of an inch long. You can find them if you dig around in the thatch area of the grass that's affected, and see them running around. If you know what you're looking for, I mean, they're real fast, and when you expose them, they run to shelter real quick, try to bury themselves into the sheaves of the grass. And what chinch bugs do is they extract the juice or the moisture from the grass. And if you have St. Augustine that's being affected by chinch bugs, it'll actually look like the grass is drying up and it's not getting enough water. A couple ways that you can tell the difference, if you have a St. Augustine lawn, a couple ways you can tell the difference between chinch bug activity and just plain drought stress, where the lawn is not actually getting enough water, is when you have chinch bug activity, you'll have brown grass that's drying up right next to lush green grass that's not being affected. If the grass was drought stressed, you would have an even brown over the whole area that was being affected. You wouldn't have lush green blades right next to brown dry blades. Another way that you can tell is you can kind of feel the soil. If the soil, if you can scoop out a handful of soil and compress it in your fist and it holds together, then it's moist enough for the grass to grow. If you compress it and let go and it just falls out and just dribbles out, then the ground is too dry and it's causing drought stress in the lawn. One other way that you can identify chinch bug activity is you can take a round cylindrical container like a coffee can that's open on both ends. And if you have an area that you suspect chinch bug activity, put it over an area that has both brown and green grass in it, and then as you're kind of holding the container onto the ground, pressing it down, fill it with water and let the water fill up. If there's any chinch bugs in that area, they'll float to the top and you'll see them swimming around on the top of the water there. That's how you can identify if there's any chinch bugs in the area. Chinch bugs can work very fast, and they're sometimes hard to control. Because they kind of force themselves down into the sheath of the grass, where if you make a treatment, they're kind of protected. So sometimes it takes 2 or 3 treatments to control them. Another thing about chinch bugs is they like very hot areas. Like areas, usually you'll find chinch bug activity close to the road or a driveway or a sidewalk in areas of direct sunlight where it's just really hot. Very rarely will you ever find them in a shady area. They like hot areas. So if you have a St. Augustine lawn and you have an area out by the road, has direct sunlight all the time, and is starting to decline, you can suspect chinch bug activity. Chinch bugs are typically active between maybe late May and the end of August or into September, the hot time of the season. The other thing about chinch bugs is you can't really do anything to prevent them. You can only treat them once they're active. The reason is because when you put the treatment on the grass, The chinch bugs stay in the upper, above the soil in the thatch part of the grass, and if you treat that and then you water, irrigate, or it rains, it's going to wash that treatment away and leave the grass unprotected again. So it's not really practical. You might think, well, if I have St. Augustine, I'll just spray it with, I'll just spray it at the beginning of the year, but that won't do any good because that treatment will just be washed away. So you kind of have to be vigilant, watch the grass, and treat it when you see that activity. Another kind of weak spot of St. Augustine is that it has tendency to be susceptible to brown patch. That's a disease, and we saw a lot of brown patch activity this winter, especially in St. Augustine, because for a certain period of this winter during December, the weather was warm for winter. It was in like the 60s, 70s, which is the ideal temperature window for disease activity. It was in the 60s and 70s, and we were getting rain. So when you have a combination of that kind of 60, 70 degree temperature window along with rain, it's ideal conditions for disease to become active, and we saw a lot of that this year. What that looks like is it looks like circles in your lawn, and sometimes just perfectly formed circles, or like serpentine shapes that will grow and move. And a lot of times you'll see the circle, and it'll start out small and it'll grow, and then as that circle grows, the grass in the middle of that circle will start to regenerate, and it'll look like a donut. You'll have green in the center with a kind of a band of brown grass around the green circle. Fortunately, the brown patch does not affect the roots or the runners of St. Augustine. So typically, like this winter when we had disease activity, this spring when the grass starts to grow again, those areas that were affected, that were brown through the winter from the disease activity, will start to regenerate, and the leaves will start to grow back. So at least that's good. Another thing about St. Augustine is it's not as susceptible to mole cricket activity as centipede is. The runners of St. Augustine are a lot more fibrous. They're less palatable to mole crickets. Mole crickets don't like them as much. They will eat the roots, but they'll usually leave the runners alone. So you don't have as much problem with mole crickets in St. Augustine grasses as you do with, say, centipede. The best time of the year to treat for mole crickets is in May. Mole crickets have a 1-year life cycle. They hatch out in March, April time frame, and then develop from a hatchling to an adult between, probably by about July, August time frame, they're full-grown adults. So consequently, if you put down a treatment in May, then you're putting down the treatment after they've hatched, but before they've become adults. What makes mole crickets so difficult to treat is, number one, they stay underground. Usually there's no way to get a direct contact between the mole cricket and the insecticide. So what you have to do is you have to apply the insecticide on the ground and then water it in to force it down into the soil to affect the mole cricket. The other thing that makes them hard to treat is that they are a large insect, so it takes a higher concentration of insecticide to actually kill them off, especially when they become an adult. The other thing that makes them hard to control is the fact that they don't stay in one place. They move around. They can fly up to a mile or two, their wings, so that they can move around. So as far as an ideal time to treat them, yes, May is the ideal time to treat. However, they can be active literally all year round. I mean, I've seen mole cricket activity throughout the winter time, and we've, when we visit, the lawns that we take care of throughout the winter, a lot of times we'll see mole cricket activity and we'll need to treat it. So just because it's not springtime doesn't mean you shouldn't treat mole crickets if you see them. Mole crickets will eat the grass year round. The juveniles and adults all feed on grass roots, and they feed year round. Now they will be less. The colder the weather it is, the colder the weather, the less active they will be. Just like any insect or cold-blooded animal, the colder it is, the slower they move, and their metabolism slows down. So you don't have the activity that you would have in the spring and summer, but they can still be active. A couple interesting biological controls that the University of Florida has been working on for the past decade or so is mole crickets, the damaging type of mole crickets that we have are not native to the United States. They actually came from South America on cargo ships, in the hulls of cargo ships, way back when they used soil as ballast for cargo ships. They came, the cargo ships would come from South America, they'd unload their cargo, and then they would unload the ballast onto the shore of the port, and the ballast, the soil, contained these mole crickets. And then the mole crickets, I think it was Louisiana, maybe where they got started, and then they just started spreading from there. So mole crickets, consequently, over years became a real pest, not only for homeowners with lawns, but also for, say, ranchers who had cattle that were, trying to grow grass to feed the cattle. The mole crickets were eating the grass. So the university started studying mole crickets, and they actually went down to South America where they originated, studied them down there, and what they found out was that down in that area there was 2 parasites that was down there that actually kept the mole cricket population under control. One of the parasites was a wasp that would paralyze the mole cricket, lay its eggs on the mole cricket, and then those eggs would hatch out, and it would kill the mole cricket. The other parasite they found was a little nematode, a microscopic little bug that used the mole cricket as a host and would kill the mole cricket. So what they did is they identified those 2 pests, brought them back to the United States, released them into our environment, and so far it seems like they've been able to establish, since those 2 pests mole cricket parasites have been able to establish themselves and have, they've identified that they have actually helped control the mole cricket population in this area. However, they're still a problem. They haven't controlled it to the point that they're not a problem to the homeowner. Okay.
The trouble is your neighbor doesn't treat it, so they just run over there for a while.
True, and if you live near a golf course, then you really have to fight mole crickets, because, like, the golf course over at Hidden Creek or Tiger Point, they cannot tolerate mole crickets on their greens. Mole crickets will mess up your putt. They're little tunnels, so they have 0 tolerance for mole crickets. They're constantly treating, so the mole crickets just move to the nearest safest place, which is usually the adjoining homes around the fairways. So, any questions about St. Augustine or centipede at this point?
Moles, are you going to talk about moles?
Moles. Okay, well, all right, let's take a moment and talk about moles. I do not have a silver bullet for moles. I wish I did. Moles are just a really, moles, in case you're not familiar with them, are a mammal about the size of a mouse or a rat. They're really weird creatures. They live underground and they tunnel through the earth, and they eat insects. One of their favorite insects to eat are earthworms. So a lot of times I get the question, well, can't you just kill all the insects in the ground and drive the moles away because they, just by killing all their food source? Well, the thing is, it's really impractical to think that you can kill all of the insects in the soil. It's just not going to happen. And even if you could, you don't want to, because a lot of the insects there are beneficial, like the earthworms. So treating the ground with insecticide is really not a practical method for getting rid of moles. There's 3 different avenues of treatment for moles. One avenue is poison, the other avenue is traps, and then the third avenue is electrosonic devices. Out of those 3, the one that I've heard people have the most success with are the sonic devices. And you know, they're little stakes that you put in the ground, they're solar operated, and they supposedly ping and drive the moles away. I've had a lot of people tell me that they've had success with that. From what I understand from talking to people, the way they have success is by using several of them at a time and kind of, you know, taking an area and cordoning it off with the stakes and kind of moving the moles, you know, away into the neighbor's yard. So, yes. A dog, yeah. You know, and you're lucky if you have Tom has a dog that takes care of his moles. I have a dog that goes after the moles. My problem is she never catches them. You know, so she digs up my yard. I mean, she's so funny. She'll go in and stick her nose in the burrow, you know, and you'll think she's just right on top of it the way she's acting, and she'll dig up 50 feet of tunnel and never come up with a mole. So, you know, and she'll think she's really done something special, you know. So if you've got one that's good enough to actually catch the mole, more power to you.
What about the mole worms? Are you, do those work?
Yeah, you know, that's a form of poison. Mole poisons come in several different forms. They come in little like jelly worms and little pellets and different things. If you're going to try and use the poisons, the best way to use it is don't touch the product, because the mole has a very strong sense of smell, and he won't, you know, he'll smell your scent on that and reject the bait. So use gloves, poke a little hole in the top of the tunnel and drop the poison in there. The key to doing it that way is to identify the active tunnels and the exploratory tunnels. Because if you have mole activity, some of the tunnels will be main tunnels, main active tunnels. There'll be corridors that they use all the time. Some of the tunnels will be exploratory tunnels that they just go out and come back and you only use one time. The way to identify the difference between an active tunnel and an exploratory tunnel is to go out one morning and look for fresh tunnels and then push them down with your feet. Come out the next day or even that afternoon and look and see which ones are pushed back up. And the ones that are pushed back up are the main tunnels, and those are the places where you want to put the poison if you're going to try and use poisons.
Other than unsightly, do they actually damage the ground?
A lot of mole activity in a concentrated area I've seen does unearth the grass enough to cause it to decline. I don't see that very often. You know, usually it's just a tunnel here and a tunnel there, and it doesn't cause a lot of damage, but it's possible. Yeah.
Teach them to eat mole crickets.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that would be good. I don't know which would do more. I don't know, but that would be good. The other type of device is a trap, and it's usually a spring-loaded device that basically the idea is you set it over the tunnel, and when the mole passes through the tunnel, then you know it skewers him. I've had people tell me that they've had success with all the different types of mole treatments. But the one I've heard the most is the electronic devices. I've even heard one of them I've heard that some people swear by is juicy fruit chewing gum. You may have heard that one. I heard another one recently. I can't remember what it was, but that person swore by that it was kind of did the same thing. You know, supposedly the juicy fruit messes up their stomach and kills them. You can try that. Okay. Okay. Getting back to the different types of grasses, centipede, St. Augustine. Oh, let me say one other thing about centipede. Well, I'll save that for later. Zoysia and Bermuda are the two other types of grasses that we have in this area that grow well. Actually, I like both those grasses. Bermuda, to me, is the most indestructible grass that you can grow. It survives just about anything. It's very forgiving. You can, with Bermuda and Bermuda only, you can fertilize it 4 or 5 times a year, and it'll tolerate it, and it'll grow thick and green, and it won't decline from over maintenance. You can use, it's very herbicide tolerant. You can spray it with herbicides. As a matter of fact, there's certain herbicides that Bermuda grass will tolerate better than other grasses, and you can use them and just clean up all the weeds and have a pristine lawn. It takes a lot of work to do that, but you can get it to where it's, you know, that's why golf courses use varieties of Bermuda grass usually in their facility, in their course, because it's so tolerant to maintenance. One of the things that Bermuda will not tolerate, though, is shade. Bermuda is not shade tolerant. It has to have direct sunlight the whole day, or it will not be dense. It will grow under shade, but it'll be very, you know, it won't be very dense at all. And Bermuda, a lot of times, you know, probably the majority of the lawns that we have around here have a little bit of Bermuda in them. It just volunteers on its own. At my house, I have an area that's probably, I have a couple acres, and there's probably an area equivalent to at least a 1/4 acre where Bermuda volunteered and just spread, and it's not irrigated. It's, you know, we just treat it periodically, but I really don't do anything. We actually drive over it, but it's, you know, it does well. So I like Bermuda. Now, some people don't like the fine texture of Bermuda, but other than that, it's not a bad grass. Zoysia, if you want the trophy lawn, and if you want the thick green, dark, lush lawn that's the trophy lawn, Zoysia is it. Zoysia gives you just really thick, dense. It's a nice dark green color, a really lush lawn. Now, fortunately, here in the last 5-7 years, sod farms in this area have started to grow Zoysia. So it's, you know, before, up until 5 years ago or so, it wasn't very available and not very many people used it. Now it's becoming a lot more popular. More sod farms are growing it, and it's just you're seeing a lot more of it. As far as weaknesses, I mean, Zoysia is. It has some shade tolerance, so you can grow it under shade. It's not quite as shade tolerant as St. Augustine, but if you have some shade, it will grow in shade. It's relatively resistant to mole cricket activity. However, mole crickets will eat it, but it's so thick, it stands up good to mole cricket activity. It's so thick that it does a really good job at outcompeting weeds. There will still be some that break through, but you know, it not nearly as many as in other types of grasses. So overall, Zoysia is just a really, really nice lawn. It does have a tendency, kind of like St. Augustine, to have disease activity at certain times of the year. But that's, again, a relatively minor problem because it only affects the blades of the grass. It doesn't affect the roots or the runners. One of the things that both Bermuda and Zoysia have that St. Augustine and Centipede do not have is they have a feature called rhizomes. What rhizomes are underground runners. St. Augustine and Centipede only have stolons, which are above ground runners. So consequently, their Zoysia and Bermuda are a lot hardier because they have above ground runners and they have below ground runners. They have two ways of reproducing themselves. So if they do have an issue, a problem, whatever, they're a lot more resilient at recovering. Whereas like if you have a St. Augustine or a Centipede lawn have a problem and all the above ground runners die, then the lawn is just, it's gone in that area. You know, it will not regenerate if those stolons die. However, with Bermuda and St. Augustine, they have the rhizomes, and if a certain part of the lawn has a problem, it declines, then those rhizomes are still there and it can regenerate from those rhizomes.